We're honored to have Indiana Wesleyan University alumnus Mr. Santiago Jaramillo with us today. Santiago is a born entrepreneur. As a child in Colombia, he started a water delivery business with his radio flyer wagon. And following his family's move to South Florida, he taught himself to play several instruments and went into business as a music teacher. This evolved into developing a small chain of music camps. Seeing yet another opportunity during his early college years, he created a new venture called University Storage. He sold his interest in this venture to his co-founder. He then held 3 internships with Exact Target, 2 in the USA and 1 in Sydney, Australia. And it was during one of those international internships in Australia that Santiago's idea for his next venture, a company he named Blue Bridge, was solidified. He saw the rise in the use of smartphones and set out to create an app platform that would enable organizations to build and continuously improve mobile apps through a simple drag and drop interface. He launched his Blue Bridge business the summer before his senior year here at Indiana Wesleyan University, and split his time between his studies and his business during his last full year as a full-time student here on this campus. As you might imagine, he worked hard, often leaving his residence hall at 8 o'clock in the morning and not returning back to his room until midnight. But it paid off. In that 1 year, Santiago earned book money, $100,000 worth. Santiago graduated in April 2012 with a Bachelor of Science degree with majors in Business Administration and Marketing. He graduated with summa cum laude honors and was a co-valedictorian of his class. Following Santiago's graduation, he's amassed an impressive list of recognitions as a young, successful entrepreneur. In 2013, he was winner of the IndyStar Rising Star Award. Again, in 2013, he appeared on Inc. magazine's list of 30 under 30 entrepreneurs. He was also recognized during that year by the White House during President Obama's administration as a champion of change. He was TechPoint's Myra Young Professional of the Year Award winner. In 2015, he appeared on the Indiana Business Journal 40 under 40 list. So I'm expecting a 50 under 50 someday in Santiago. In 2016, he was named Indiana Latino Businessman of the Year. In 2016, Santiago co-authored a best-selling book with his business partner, Todd Richardson, entitled Agile Engagement. This book expounds on Santiago's latest passion, employee engagement. After selling his Blue Bridge business for $8 million, Santiago started this new company in 2015 named Amplify. And the mission of this organization is to help employers unlock the human potential by helping their employees to do the best work of their lives. So we're proud of Mr. Jaramillo as an alumnus of Indiana Wesleyan University. And as a young, successful entrepreneur, he has exemplified the mission of IWU to make the world a better place. In the midst of his devotion to work, he and his wife, Kate, who's here with us today, have devoted themselves to a launch team of 15 to 20 people who've started a church in downtown Indianapolis. They started this past Easter. He has shared of his time to inspire future business people by taking time to speak at high schools and colleges, and continues to participate in mentoring coffees with young folks looking to find their life calling and to start nonprofits or businesses. You'll find that he continues to assist nonprofits with their digital media or people culture strategy. So we're deeply grateful for Santiago's willingness to serve IWU as he has just recently joined Indiana Wesleyan University Board of Trustees. Santiago, would you come and share with us now? It's great to have you here.
So I'm incredibly honored to be with you today at Commencement from one of the finest Christ-centered universities in the world. So the day was Sunday, May 30th of 1999. I was building a treehouse with my father and my brother, and it was around 9 a.m. on a Sunday morning, and it was time to get ready to go to church. And so I said, hey, Dad, is there any way that we can skip church today and finish building the treehouse? We just have to put the palm fronds on the top and it'll be done. My father, being a smart man, he says, go ask Mom. And so I did. Mom approves the skip, unprecedented. And so we continue building the treehouse. 30 minutes later, we hear some gunshots. We go up to the third story of our house, look diagonally across the street where the church was, and there was 2 military trucks parked outside of the church. It turns out, we found out a few hours later, that what had happened is the leftist militia groups, the guerrillas, came into the church, told everyone that they were the military, the army, and then proceeded to herd over 100 people, men, women, and children, to 2 trucks to be kidnapped for ransom for over a year. They were released after about a year of being in the jungle, essentially kidnapped, having to pay huge ransoms to get their loved ones back, but everyone made it back safely. So my parents sought to give us a better life, to move, to get a work visa and move to the U.S., to South Florida, to Fort Lauderdale, to pursue a better life for our family. And I remember one of the hardest parts of adapting to the U.S. culture as a 5th grader and learning the language and really making it here was the colloquialisms, the idioms, the sayings. You know what I'm talking about? Like chip off the old block. Like, what does that mean, right? Or like the one that really got me, I'm not sure if this has happened to you, but you've had a saying and you've maybe gotten it wrong and you found out much later you'd been saying it all wrong. Has that ever happened to you? So mine was a little embarrassing and a little stereotypical. So mine was, you know the phrase, in a nutshell, what I'm saying is this? I'm not sure if people felt sort of bad to correct me or if it was simply they didn't understand what I was saying, but for 2 to 3 years I said in a nacho instead, which is just, we don't even eat nachos in Colombia. It makes a lot more sense, right? Like in a small digestible morsel. I don't know what a nutshell is, but I digress. So with that cultural blunder in mind, I set out to write this message today with a healthy respect for the tradition and cultural nuance of commencement speeches. As I was preparing, I watched some famous commencement speeches of the past, and I noticed that many of the speakers were attempting to answer a variant of 2 questions. How can I be happy? Or how can I be satisfied? And as I thought more about these questions and their answers, I realized that something was off. I realized that it maybe wasn't just the answers that were unsatisfying, but that some of the questions themselves seemed to be the wrong questions to be asking in the first place. One of the most challenging lessons I've had to learn as a business leader and now as a husband is the importance of asking the right questions. A good leader knows how to ask the right questions and then invites others to participate in arriving at the answers. Jesus modeled this leadership approach as he is recorded in the Bible as asking 307 questions, yet only answering directly 3 of them. For every question that he asked, he answered literally 1 out of 100. And so with that in mind, I believe that the most valuable message I can share with you today isn't providing the answers to any questions for you, but to perhaps stir in you a desire to ask the questions that I have found are accretive toward a life well lived. So as I reflected further on this, it helped me to imagine all of you sitting here today, looking your best. You look really good, by the way. I agree with President Wright. And really ready to take on the world in those fashionable black and blue ponchos that we're all wearing. And so I thought about what questions do I wish I was asking myself back then, 6 years ago, when I was sitting in your seats about faith, a career, marriage, and life. And so today I want to share with you 4 stories and questions that have most impacted my life. I don't have the key to unlock success or happiness, but all I hope to do today is to humbly suggest some better questions than how can I lead a happy life for you to think about and wrestle with. So I started my first business when I was 7 years old, like President Wright shared. My family lived in Cali, just outside of the city boundaries, and so the city water didn't reach our neighborhood. And so to give to children and to cook with, we had to get it from a Coca-Cola truck. Those big gallon water jugs had to be shipped in, and it was a mess for everybody. Nobody liked going up to the front gate to get these water jugs, and the Coca-Cola truck didn't like collecting and invoicing just cents and dollars from so many people. And so I went up to the Coca-Cola truck and said, why don't you sell only to me? I'll deliver door to door, and you'll handle 1 account, 1 invoicing, and 1 collection. And so as a 7-year-old, I was able to secure now what I understand as an exclusive distribution agreement with the Coca-Cola truck, and I became this kind of Uber for water business as a 7-year-old. I strapped a little red radio flyer wagon to the back of my bicycle, got some help piling the water jugs on top, and rode around to every house after school. Half the calls that my house would get would be for my mom and dad's business, and then the other half would be asking for a new water jug delivery, and I would answer them with my business's name and then go ahead and deliver the water. And there was real satisfaction, even at 7 years old, in finding a problem and coming up with a creative solution, delivering it in a unique way, and interacting with people and meeting their needs, and then actually walking away with something valuable for myself as well. It was all incredibly satisfying. It was my art. And so we all have our unique gifting, and by that I simply mean our own specific talents and inclinations that we can cultivate into our unique gifting and life calling. Like Frederick Buechner famously said, the place God calls you to is the place where your deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meet. So the first question I experience is important to answer is, how do we find our gifting? How do you find your unique gifts? We all have certain gifting, but how do we discover those and then nurture those? For me, my red wagon delivery business was the beginning of the answer to this first question. I didn't see it that way or called it such at 7 years old, but this was the seed that began growing the roots of my unique gifting and life calling. A few months later, though, I had this realization. In Cali, there were these stoplights where homeless kids would stand around selling different trinkets and begging for money. And when we drove by, my heart just broke every time when I looked at their faces with only a window separating us, but really being a world apart. They were completely stuck in a hopeless cycle of generational poverty and pain. They had no parents to look after them. They would beg all day, then return at night, get their money taken away from them, leaving them with nothing, just as how they began the day. I never got used to it. I never adjusted. It broke my heart every time. And prior to this point, though, I'd been spending the vast majority of my Uber for Water profits on candy. After cornering the water market for my neighborhood, I remember eating as much candy as I could because I could actually afford it. And it was Snickers bars, by the way. Of course, it was great for a moment, but then it was deeply, deeply unsatisfying. And I couldn't figure out why, until the dissonance between my candy hoarding and the situations of the street children begging was too much to ignore. My mom helped me come up with the idea of buying them sandwiches, of using my profits from the water business, and instead of buying candy, buying bread, cheese, and ham to give out to the homeless children at stoplights that we would see. We would run out of sandwiches literally in the first 10 minutes of every single drive that we went into town. The need was great in a post-Pablo Escobar economy where the drug money that had been propping up the economy vanished seemingly overnight. So the act of using the water business profits to fund the sandwiches gave the endeavor so much purpose and meaning. But the problem with the question of finding my unique gifting was that it was all about me, my gifting, my calling, my private stash of candy, my good feeling after handing out sandwiches. And the truth that I found is that true success is more about others than about ourselves. If I run a technology startup with great employees, have my photo in newspapers and magazines, and are given to give speeches before large audiences, but I don't use the platform and resources for the benefit of others, then that 7-year-old boy handing out a sandwich to a street child was a greater success than I am. If that's the case, I have gained the world and lost my soul. Like Thomas Merton, the American monk, pointed out, we may spend our whole life climbing the ladder of success, only to find that when we get to the top, that our ladder was leaning against the wrong wall. So the question is therefore, not only how do we each find our unique gifting, but how do we use that unique gifting to achieve success, and how will we define success? So ever since my mom and I gave out those sandwiches to those homeless kids in Cali, a vision for what I call the Red Wagon Project began developing, a cause-driven nonprofit that would seek to break the cycle of poverty for Colombia's youngest and most vulnerable through technology and education. So when I founded Blue Bridge in my dorm room in Reed Hall, I'm not sure if that's still there anymore, I had a specific idea of what success looked like and why I was starting a business. I wanted to build a great company, sell it for $100 million, and use those proceeds in my network to fund Red Wagon and accomplish its mission. But somewhere along the way, that mission got corrupted. I began rationalizing decisions and behaviors of mine that fell far short of true servant leadership. I rationalized ways that I treated people because they appeared as the right decisions to grow the business faster. The end began to justify the means. Fast forward about a year and a half later, as I worked 80-hour weeks during the 6 months where we were selling Blue Bridge, I had a series of leadership missteps. I trusted less. I didn't communicate well. I didn't care for people. I had harsh interactions with team members that tore them down instead of building them up. I had believed my own lie. Even though, yes, Red Wagon was a driving factor in my purpose for Blue Bridge, if I was truly, unflinchingly, brutally honest with myself, I also realized that the reason I wanted to make a lot of money with Blue Bridge wasn't only to protect the vulnerable through Red Wagon, but also to feel more in control of my future by removing any financial uncertainty. Never again have to work a job I don't love, the freedom and flexibility that comes from that amount of resources, that was appealing to my heart because I find it far easier to rely on myself than to trust in God for my future. And so the reality hit me all at once on a winter weekend in early 2017 as I got news that a co-founder was leaving because of me. I broke down. It was one of those cry on the carpet with deep sadness and shame at what I had uncovered in my heart type cries. I had found my gifting, leadership and entrepreneurship. I had used it to achieve success, and then I realized that my definition of success had been all wrong. I had just sold the business for $8 million before turning 30 years old. I had met governors and presidents, won national and state awards, had married a woman way out of my league, and yet I was deeply unhappy. I had climbed the ladder and found I had reached the very top of the wrong wall. Like John Acuff said, if you pursue the right goal in the wrong way, you'll still end up in the wrong place. This is when I realized that my legacy and calling for this season wasn't about creating a $100 million company and then funding Red Wagon. My legacy was how I treated, served, and developed the people around me in the right here and now in the pursuit of building a great company that I could then leverage to serve the most vulnerable. Redefining my definition of success was revelatory to me. I sought forgiveness from those I had hurt, acknowledged my failure and lesson publicly in front of the whole team, found a leadership coach to invest in the hard work of unlearning my self-reliance, and began a humble spiritual journey of true leadership growth that I'm very much still on. Therefore, the third question that I experienced was, how do we leverage each of our gifting? Yes, but toward the right definition of success. And so one rainy, gray spring day, I met with my leadership coach, Chip Nady, because I was very frustrated with an individual in the business who wasn't leading well and was failing to do his job. I was angry. I had several conversations about his behavior, all to no avail. And so Chip asked me a series of questions and challenged me that my heart was in the wrong place. He shared that my heart was in a place where I just wanted this person to snap into line and do their job. And he said to me, "You're only frustrated because you can't control this pawn in your chess game to do your bidding, instead of being chiefly concerned about how to use this opportunity to help them grow and develop into a better leader and professional." And I was reminded of that shame once more. At the end of the meeting, he assigned me some homework. I expectantly awaited some clever series of next steps that would follow. And he said, "I challenge you to pray about this, to ask God to transform my heart, your heart, into a leader's heart that would care more about the person than the output I needed this person to produce." He challenged me to pray for God to transform my heart toward that person, and instinctively, almost compulsively, I responded, "What does God have anything to do with this?" He looked back at me in silence, and it hit home this time. My trust issues, my self-reliance. I was trying to be God again. My deepest spiritual challenge thus far in life has been to trust and rely on God to transform me into the leader that He wants me to be, not controlling my own control issues. And I don't have this figured out yet. I'm learning that what I need to do is, after planting the seeds and after watering them meticulously in whatever I'm doing, I need to trust God for the harvest. When I try to control and white-knuckle the harvest, I fail to trust God, and I usually fail somehow as a leader. It's the honing of that subtle discernment that Richard Rohr calls the task within the task, or what we are really doing when we are doing what we are doing, our true intent and motivation behind what we do, not the carefully constructed narratives that we tell ourselves and others about why we do what we do. This is what Paul calls the discerning of spirits, and this is my final version of the question for you today. How do we leverage our unique gifting toward the right definition of success with the right motivations? Let me read to you a quote from Richard Rohr's book, Falling Upward. It is when we begin to pay attention and seek integrity precisely in the task, within the task, that we can experience a purifying of our intentions and a growing honesty about our actual motives. It is hard work. Most often, we don't pay attention to that inner task until we have had some kind of fall or failure in the outer tasks. Perhaps until we have fallen off the ladder, or perhaps reached the top and realized that we climbed the wrong wall. And therein lies the counterintuitive truth. As we face the losses of our false idols and discover the wrong ladders that we've been climbing, it's actually adversity and suffering that become the paths toward greater spiritual maturity. Well, today is a day of joyous celebration. We will eventually experience a valley in our lives, and therein will be an amazing opportunity for transformative growth for each of us. I don't have the answers, and I've shared with you all today the questions I have learned to ask for thus far, but I know there's still many more that I haven't yet learned to ask. So I'll close with Jesus' words in Matthew from the Message translation. If your first concern is to look after yourself, you'll never find yourself. But if you forget about yourself and look to me, you'll find both yourself and me. So may we ask the right questions, may we turn adversity into growth, and most importantly, may we find our true life by giving it away. Thank you.